What is going on? Thank you for tuning in to the MMA Podcast 174. It is June 23rd, a wonderful day, and we are here to break it down. As always, if you are listening live, you can call in, tweet in. We got a bunch to break down. UFC Ottawa was this past Saturday. Saw a big welterweight title eliminator fight between Stephen Thompson, Rory MacDonald, and Wonderboy shined again. Talk a bit about Fedor versus Maldonado. A few fight announcements made this week. The UFC potentially being sold for $4+ billion. Bellator 157 this weekend. Ton to break down. Let's do it.
We did it for the love of the game. I did it for. The game will never be the same.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast.
That's right. It is the MMA Podcast. We're joined today, like I said, this is beautiful June 23rd. My mom's birthday, actually. Happy birthday, Mom. We're joined by P Money. He's on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. What up, dude?
Yes, Big J Waltz, proving you are legally not at fault, bringing us the finest in MMA podcasting, production quality, and news content. My goodness, always a pleasure to be here with you, sir. Just sweating my damn ass off here in Southern California, but that's par for the course. I cannot complain. We had a sweet card with that UFC Ottawa card, man. Excited to break that down and chop up the news action we got for you in the world of MMA this week.
You got that dry heat over in Cali. We got that wet heat here in Florida. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. As always, you can follow the MMA Podcast on Twitter. If you are listening live, like I mentioned at the top, call in. Let us know what you think about any and all topic, MMA or not MMA. 213-457-3380 is the number, or you can Skype us at the MMA Podcast. Click the links at the top of themmapodcast.com to subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube, all for free.
Free 99?
The low. Yeah, but Twitter's definitely the best place to follow us, see us crack-wise, maybe during an event. UFC Ottawa, I usually like to tweet a bunch during events. I was actually I was out traveling around. I was able to catch the main card, but was not able to catch the prelims. So Pat, you might need to carry us through the prelims of this. Is rare card. I missed any fights, but I wasn't able to catch the I believe there were Fight Pass prelims, then Fox Sports 2 prelims, then the main card on Fox Sports 1 that started pretty late. It was a 10:30 p.m. start, which usually the Fox cards will start around 8. This started even later than the normal pay-per-view start time, which is 10. So I know you saw at least the UFC Fight Pass prelims. Elias Theodoro, Randa Marcos, and Puncher King Ali Bagatinov all getting unanimous decisions. Colby Covington, the only finish there on Fight Pass. What did you think of the prelims you saw?
I thought they were decent prelims. Jake, I can't believe you missed it. The UFC makes it so easy. You have 4 fights on Fight Pass, then 4 fights on Fox Sports 2, then 5 fights on Fox Sports 1. It's so easy for a casual fan to follow and watch all the cards. Of course.
And to butt in, I actually heard the Joe Rogan Fight Companion. I was listening to that, or the audio of that in my car while I was driving on YouTube. and there was a moment where, like, I believe they switched the fight over in the middle of the fight, and they actually were sort of annoyed by it. Like they, in the middle of a fight, switched the fight over. I think it was the Calderwood Letourneau fight. Maybe like a NASCAR race had like gone long or something on Fox Sports 1, and they couldn't start the fight when they wanted to, or start the main card when they wanted to on Fox Sports 1. So they put the first part of JoJo and Valerie on Fox Sports 2, and then when the NASCAR race was over, put it on Fox Sports 1. Just was not the easiest card to watch.
No. Well, and they don't make it that way typically. So of course I was being rather facetious, busting your chops there. But no, you know what? I think I thought there were some decent prelims. I mean, Bagutinov pulling the curtains against Gianni Herrera. Pretty solid UD for Bagutinov. There was a point late in the third round. Herrera had a solid Kimura attempt lock in. I was sitting on my couch. I was watching. I'm screaming, break his arm! Break his fucking arm! And unfortunately, well, I really don't wish anybody get their arm broken. You know, I would hope they tap before that. But Herrera was not able to secure the submission. It went to the scorecards where Bagutinov dominated. Covington versus Jonathan Meunier. Decent scrap, couple relative unknowns. I mean, Covington has a couple fights in the UFC. Was able to get a late stoppage there in the third round, use some nice punches, stunned Meunier, and was able to work a little ground and pound and eventually transition to that rear naked choke. Randa Marcos versus Jocelyn Jones-Leinberger. Good catch weight scrap there for a couple of the UFC women's strawweights. Close fight, man. It was a close fight. 30-27, 29-28, 29-28. I was thinking it was going to be a split. Liebarger actually looked like she was wearing just a little less damage than Marcos at the end of that one, but Marcos did get the unanimous decision nod. And then Elias Theodorou versus Sam Alvey. I think a lot of us were expecting this one to be a little bit more of a barn burner. Both of these guys, solid strikers. Elias was just a little more crafty. Really seemed like he had Alvey frustrated. Elias was using a good mix of strikes, his kicks, punches, using them all very well, using some good movement. Really frustrating Alvey. He certainly was not willing to stand in the pocket and trade, and just basically out-hustled Alvey to a unanimous decision victory there. Then the Fox Sports 2 prelims. Joe Soto taking down Chris Beal with a third round rear naked choke. And Chris Beal started off with a lot of hype behind him, coming off of, I want to say he was on the Ultimate Fighter, won his first 2 victories, and has now dropped 3 in a row. Joe Soto, good for him, making a good showing for himself. You know, he was brought into the UFC to face TJ Dillashaw and on late notice, and put a really good show together for himself on that one. So nice little momentum builder for him, getting that third round RNC against Chris Beal. Christoph Jotko versus McRory. A brief fight, very quick finish. Jotko coming through the underdog with a solid KO of Tana McRory. He had McRory stiffed up. I had the Barn Cat in that one. I thought the Barn Cat would have a little bit more bit of an advantage in the grappling aspect of things. But, man, it ended so quick. You know, they were feeling it out on the feet. I don't know if McRory was maybe a little too comfortable getting that TKO over Josh Salmon himself. I don't know if it was that, you know, he was probably just setting it up. It was only a minute into the fight, and, man, he just got caught real quick. Christoph Jotko coming through with a solid finish there. And then the highly touted Misha Serkinov defeating Ion Kutaleba with the third round arm triangle choke. Good to see the light heavyweights getting a little bit of action there. One of our least active divisions, it seems like, and Serkinov keeping his hype train intact with that third round finish. And then the featured prelim, Fox Sports 2, Jason Sago versus Leandro Silva. Split decision there, close fight. definitely some solid action all the way around. I'd say for the Fight Pass prelim portion, and the Fox Sports 2 prelims as well.
And moving up to the main card, we'll save the co-main event and main event for their own respective topics. We'll move through this card pretty quickly. 3 fights: a women's flyweight fight between Joanne Calderwood and Valerie Letourneau. Valerie, coming off that title shot, lost to Joanna Jędrzejczyk. JoJo looking really mean. She was the underdog in this fight, plus 155, and at least on my scorecard, she won the first and second round before scoring a third round TKO body kick, followed up with a flurry of punches. Looking good now. You know, we put a question mark next to her name when she got armbarred by Marina Moroz last year. But other than that, I mean, that's the only dark spot on her record. She lost in the tough house to Rose Namajunas, a tough opponent. And now with this win against Valerie Letourneau, we'll see where it moves her up the straw weight rankings. I'm actually curious if I'm not sure they've updated it since the fights. Yeah, because you have Stephen Thompson now at number 1 at welterweight. JoJo now number 7, moving up 5 spots from number 12. Valerie falling 4 spots to number 9. So yeah, we'll see the women right above her: Jessica Andrade, Carolina Kowalkiewicz, who I believe is scheduled for a fight pretty soon. We'll see who JoJo gets next, but it looks like she's finally sort of shaken off whatever made her have a slow start in the UFC, and she's getting some wins. Olivier Aubin-Mercier was a pretty big favorite here. The biggest favorite on the main card by a good stretch, minus 400. I actually thought he lost the first round. It was close to a 10-10, but I gave it to T-Ball Goody 10-9 because he finished it strong with a flurry of punches, knocking Olivier back. I gave Olivier the second round, and then obviously the scores were made moot with a rear naked choke. This dude can roll. You know, he's probably not on the level of, you know, a Damian Maia. But I mean, this is a dude who's 27, maybe in, you know, a decade. Maybe this is one of the top grapplers in the UFC. The guy's only a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. He's a black belt in judo, trains over in TriStar in Montreal, and pretty much everyone he's fought, with the exception of Chad Laprise and Carlos Diego Ferreira, he's dispatched easily. I mean, that big prospect from, I think, Australia or something, Jake Lindsay. No, that he's American, but had a lot of hype behind him. You know, got a inverted triangle Kimura choke in the second round. I mean, yeah, this Aubin-Mercier guy is very skilled on the ground. Steve Bossy and Sean O'Connell, man, this was a crazy fight. I mean, this fight, if I recall correctly, I want to make sure. Yeah, the first round, O'Connell just beat him the hell up. Arguably a 10-8. I gave it a 10-9. Second round, Bossy's beating the hell out of MacDonald. Again, could have been a 10-8. I gave it a 10-9. Third round, they were just beating the hell out of each other, and I gave it a 10-10. I actually scored it a 29-29 draw. I could have seen a 29-28 or a 28-28 draw. If I had to give the third round to somebody, it would be Steve Bossy. I think he maybe rocked MacDonald one or two more times. Was throwing with a little bit more heat. So if anyone had to win that fight, I guess I'm glad it was Bossy who took the fight 29-27, 29-28, 29-28. Meaning, I guess those last two judges must have scored it. O'Connell, bossy. But yeah, two relative unknowns who showed they deserved to be on the main card, put forth a damn war. One fight of the night, obviously. Both of these guys $50,000 richer. And for Steve Bossy, the former hockey player, I don't know. I don't think he's going to ever elevate to a point where he's, challenging for a light heavyweight championship. But just feed him more bangers at 205 and let's see some more wars. This dude loves the fight. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a good set of scraps to kick off the main card. As you mentioned, Calderwood versus Letourneau. Man, I am very glad I didn't bet on that fight because I was super close to just dumping a ton of cash on Letourneau. I thought she was going to handle Calderwood fairly easily. A lot of shine had been coming off of Calderwood since coming over to the UFC. She was very highly touted. Didn't quite live up to some of that hype, but man, definitely did a great job. I mean, she stopped Valerie Letourneau, something the UFC Women's Strawweight champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk couldn't do. So solid showing for her. Now, of course, this was the first UFC Women's Flyweight fight. So being at 125 pounds, a different contest than a strawweight contest. But yeah, very solid showing for Joanne. With the TKO in the third round over Valerie Letourneau. And as you mentioned, Olivier Aubin-Mercier defeated Thibaut Gouti with the third round submission. Gouti definitely put on a good showing. I wasn't expecting a ton from him. But he made it a fight. And Mercier, as you mentioned, made the scorecards irrelevant with that third round submission there. Another RNC, one of, I want to say 3 we had on the card in Ottawa. Reminds me of, I want to say, the Canadian Gleison Tebow. Except Mercier, maybe he needs to work on that striking. And again, you mentioned, hey, let's see where Mercier is a decade from now. A guy like Tebow, he spent at least a decade in the UFC by now, I want to say, and his striking has definitely come along over the years. And I think really that's what we need to see from Mercier, a little more, or Aubin-Mercier, a little bit more of that striking. He's definitely got a solid base in the grappling department, very strong, and showed that again on Saturday night. And as you mentioned, though, Steve Bossé versus Sean O'Connell, that was, my goodness, that was a Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner 1, Dan Henderson versus Shogun 1, kind of old school, just slobber knocker. This was a fight. You'd think these guys hated each other. You think someone fucked someone's girlfriend or something, the way they were scrapping it out. My goodness. I mean, they were both cracking each other from the jump. Even in the beginning of round 1, Bossé landed some really solid, quick right hands. O'Connell showing a strong jaw and got a flash knockdown there. Looked like Bossé was almost just a little stiffed up on the way down. One of those instances where like he hit the canvas and was like immediately awake when he hit the canvas, but he seemed like he was out of it on his way down, but somehow managed to recover, managed to stay competitive somewhat in the round, and managed to come back and win the fight on the scorecards. That was a nuts fight. I really do not envy the judges for that one. I was looking at that one, and I know I really wanted it to be a draw. And I think it was one of those fights, one of the few fights, or let's say Mark Hunt versus Bigfoot Silva won.
One of the few. Say that fight, yeah.
That one of the only fights where you're ever happy it ended in a draw. This was one of those ones where I was like, okay, if they just called it a draw, I'm good with that. Let the UFC pay them both their win bonus. Hopefully they did both get a win bonus anyways, because that was just that was a magical fight, and truly one of the fights where you watch that and you're like, okay, that is one of the many reasons I'm a mixed martial arts fan.
Yeah, and man, that was a fun fight. So was Donald Cerrone and Patrick Cote. It was more of a one-sided fight. Man, Predator showed he's got a hell of a chin, a ton of heart fighting. He started as a 205er, fighting now at 170 against the guy who used to be a one. Didn't Cerrone fight once as a featherweight, or am I dreaming? Has he? I know he was at lightweight most of his career in the WEC.
Yeah. You know what? I
and UFC.
think
Did he ever fight at 45?
not to my
Am I
recollection.
dreaming?
I want to say maybe they talked about it, but I don't think he ever did.
Yeah, I'm looking now. Looks like all of his careers was lightweight, but this is funny. A guy who started at 205 against a guy who started at 155. They're both fighting at 170. You'd assume the guy at 205 would win, but Donald Cerrone is a motherfucker, man. If he can solve the whole slow start thing, which is what happened against Pettis, which is what happened against Dos Anjos. Man, if he can fix that, he's one of the best fighters in the world. Guy, like I said, is on an absolute tear in his last, there's 21 fights, 30, in his last 16, 17 fights, he's only lost to two people, the two people I just mentioned. And now he's doing very well at welterweight. So I don't know. He said he's willing to fight at either division. He's just looking to get paid. He had a cryptic tweet a couple days ago where he said he's pretty sure he's going to be fighting soon. I can't think of anyone that it would obviously be. You have Ferguson fighting Chiesa, Alvarez fighting Dos Anjos at lightweight. Is Nurmagomedov tied up with anyone currently?
I
No.
want to say Nurmagomedov is not scheduled.
He beat Daryl Horcher a couple months ago. So who I think Cerrone versus Nurmagomedov would be super fun, or if he wants to stay. I mean, I don't know. I think he probably does. It's probably difficult for him to make 55. He always does look pretty skinny. I mean, he looked cut even at 70, but I think it's possible for Cerrone to make the weight. Because when we talk about the top of the top at welterweight, you have some guys where size might really start to become an issue. Guys like Stephen Thompson, who can keep you away with those kicks. Dudes like Carlos Condit. I mean, that's a big boy. Neil Magny. You have guys with power like Johnny Hendricks and Woodley. Not saying that Cerrone couldn't overcome those mountains, but I would still say he has a better chance to get a championship at 55 than he does at 70. What do you think is next for Cerrone? I'll go ahead and say a fight against Khabib.
Well, that's a great call. And it's so hard to predict where Cerrone goes from here. I mean, yeah, it was a fantastic showing from Cerrone. Really had his way with Patrick Cote, and nobody's really beat up beat up Cote like that. I mean, aside from maybe Anderson Silva, Cote, he's always in it. He's always in the mix, and man, it's so hard to predict where Cerrone goes from here because, as you mentioned, he can go back to 155. But he seems to be enjoying things at 170. I mean, he's already had 2 fights with Rafael Dos Anjos, the current UFC lightweight champ. Both of those were unsuccessful. His second outing was even less impressive than his first outing. Man, as you mentioned, Cerrone did say at one point he's just looking to get paid. He's looking for those money fights. I think those are probably more at 170 pounds right now. He's still working his way up the ladder there. He's not – I don't even know if he's ranked at 170. So
they can still just work towards putting together some fun fights. If he goes back to 155 pounds, let's say for the Nurmagomedov fight, even though that would be a good one, if he wins, he's just kind of killing a prospect there. And he's already fought the champ twice and has not been successful. So I'd say, you know what, I wouldn't be surprised if he sticks around at 170 pounds. The only question is who to give him. I mean, there's certainly no shortage of opponents for him there at 170. I mean, my goodness, it really depends on which way the UFC wants to go. I could see them putting him up against, what about Rick Story? What kind of fight would that be? The Cowboy versus Story. Those are both beasts right there. Both come to scrap. You know what? I'm going to put that down. I want to put that into the ether. That's what I want to see. I want to see Cerrone versus Story. Both doing good things at 170 right now, and I think that would just be a war. So I would not mind seeing that one up next.
Cowboy versus Horror Story. That brings us to the last fight on the UFC Ottawa card. Rory MacDonald and Stephen Thompson. You went Wonder Boy. I went with Wonder Boy hate again. I went with Rory. I thought Rory, just the technicality, would be able to get over that weird kickboxing style. And I'm not going to sit here and say, the only reasons Thompson won was because Rory looked flat. Rory did look very flat. He looked pretty bad. But Thompson is just on his game, was not letting up the entirety of the fight, and earned a 50-45. I scored it 10-9 Thompson every single round. 2 of the 3 judges scored at 50-45. One scored at 48-47. I don't know what 2 rounds he gave Rory. Rory was not putting up much offense the whole fight. I don't have the fight metric stats in front of me, but Stephen Thompson was landing and throwing just at a rate that was so much higher. Thompson had 1 nick on his eye, and that was about it. When the fight was over, I don't know if I can blame Rory that much. He just took one, not just, but in his last fight, he took one of the biggest beatings we've ever seen a man take in a fight, going 5 rounds against ruthless Robbie Lawler. UFC 189, just getting absolutely pummeled. He looked like an alien the next day, just both sides of his face all swollen up. I mean, the guy was absolutely beat to a pulp, and I believe almost had his nose broken, in a way that could have been life threatening. I mean, just was absolutely torn up. Which brings me to the point that I started thinking about toward the later rounds in this fight. Did that fight take off of Rory's career? I mean, I do honestly hope in the next couple fights, whether they're in the UFC and Bellator, this was rumored for a while to be Rory's last UFC fight, especially if he couldn't beat Wonder Boy and didn't have that value of being a title contender in the UFC. Chances are, I think that he goes to Bellator. Just from everything I'm hearing, I'd like to see him stay in the UFC, just because I like to see the best fighters in the world fight the best fighters in the world. I'm not gonna blame him for going to Bellator, where they'll probably pay him just about as much, and he'll be able to wear his own sponsors, and might be in a financially better position in Bellator, where he is. Now that's an interesting title picture at welterweight that's forming up over in Scott Coker's promotion over there. So I wish the best for him, but I was starting to think, just seeing the way that it didn't seem physical, it seemed mental. It seemed like Rory just was not mentally that killer like we've seen in so many other fights, and not I do know you have to be extra cautious against a guy like Stephen Thompson, who is not only a master at countering, but can counter you from range with the kicks and can counter you from angles where you don't even see the strike coming. You feint a kick and then the hook's coming the other way. Stephen Thompson is a beast. And a guy who, almost like prime Anderson Silva, you have to be very careful with every bit of aggression you put forth because they're a countering master. That said, I don't know. I hope that Robbie fight didn't take off Rory's career, but that's what I was thinking the case might be. Kane and Jr., I don't think either of those guys have been the same since they beat the shit out of one another for three fights, especially in that second fight and the third fight too. Pardon me, but yeah, Rory probably going to Bellator, and Stephen Thompson. I mean, you got to give Wonder Boy the winner of Woodley and Lawler next, right? Unless GSP comes in and cashes in his Money in the Bank briefcase. I feel like you got to give Stephen Thompson a title shot.
Yeah, Stephen Thompson absolutely is next up for the 170-pound champion, whether that ends up being Robbie Lawler if he is able to retain against Tyron, or if Tyron's able to be successful and defeat Robbie Lawler. Stephen Thompson has to be next. The commentary for this fight, I noticed
Would you let GSP skip him? If
I would not.
GSP, we'll talk about it later in the show, but GSP, I guess, recently went on the MMA Hour and said, he plans on coming back to fighting. GSP runs in, Money in the Bank. I want to cash in my briefcase right now. I
want my title shot.
Do you let him skip? You don't let him skip Stephen Thompson.
No, I do not. GSP, he abdicated the throne. He left his belt. He vacated his title, and he said, I don't want anymore. So there's been a lot that's been going on while he's been out. And Stephen Thompson, former training partner of GSP. Now, this is something we talked about a little bit before we went live, Jake, is that Stephen Thompson did, at least at some point, go up to TriStar and train with the guys up there, GSP, and I'm presuming Rory MacDonald as well. And my theory, because I thought MacDonald definitely looked flat. This was not the Red King who was talking about coming out with the animal aggression or, whatever he was talking about in the pre-fight interviews. None of that was there. And my theory behind that is just, if he did, I think they did train together at TriStar for a little bit. They brought in Stephen Thompson, the kickboxing Superman, to show them how to put some of them good strikes together. And in their time there, my theory is that Rory MacDonald quickly found out he didn't have shit for Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy basically came in to teach them what is up. And this was no longer a sparring match. This was a fight. And it seemed to me that MacDonald just knew. He was like, man, I can't take Wonder Boy down. And he is the striking master. And that was basically it for the whole fight. Wonder Boy, man, had that cardio rocking, keeping good angles, staying elusive. His strikes wasn't going so hard on the kicks, probably avoiding a lot of the takedown threat there, but his hands were looking good. And one of the things I really like too is sometimes when you see some of these guys with a more karate style, your Stephen Thompsons, let's say Lyoto Machida specifically. I want to look at Lyoto Machida just because he has a similar style, very excellent, but Machida, one of his things, at least in my estimation, and in some of the karate guys' estimation as well, not just in UFC, but in just karate overall as a martial arts. Some of these guys, when the single shots aren't falling their foe, when they have a decent chin, and that bullseye shot on the chin just isn't enough to drop them. Some of these guys don't know how to handle that. And, when you look at, let's say, when Rory MacDonald bum rushed Stephen Thompson, it didn't happen quite often, but there were a couple times where MacDonald did let that desperation go, and he really went for it. And Stephen Thompson was able to put together some solid boxing-like combinations with the hands. He was able to stand and trade in the pocket a little bit, dish out the greater damage, escape, and return to being elusive. And that really impressed me with Stephen Thompson. I really think that's one thing a lot of these karate guys don't necessarily have. They're good with the distance. They're good at getting in and out. But when the pressure comes and the time comes to stand in the pocket, that's where you'll see a lot of them fold, just in my estimation, observations. And Wonder Boy, man, he showed some good hands. He showed some good boxing, was able to stay in the pocket, touch up MacDonald, and be more accurate with his boxing combinations, and get out and return to what was allowing him to take such a significant lead on the scorecards. It was a fantastic showing, and really, I think now that he's training with Weidman as well, Thompson also showed some great grappling for a guy that's, again, we talk all about his kickboxing, not necessarily about his grappling. He showed some solid moves, controlled Rory MacDonald. It wasn't a pure Weidman-esque type of control, but man, he had some great moves, some good side control. Him and Weidman together, man, it really that's a solid team, a good couple guys training together. I really hope, similarly, Weidman can pick up a little bit of Wonder Boy's kickboxing acumen, and they can really help round each other out. But man, this was just a absolute dominant performance from Wonder Boy, and he absolutely has to be next in line for the 170-pound belt. He's really showing the progression. Knocked out Johnny Hendricks in the first round. Absolutely dominated Rory MacDonald. Very little trouble. He's been handling everybody. Great finishes. Showing the cardio, showing the ability to go 5 rounds and put together a solid game plan. Man, yeah, you got to get him in there for the title, Jakey.
Yeah, and I believe that fight between Robbie Lawler and Tyron Woodley is going to be July 30th, UFC 201. You've really got to match the winner of that fight up against Stephen Thompson. I guess we'll move on. Last week, if you listened to TMP 173, the Fedor fight was actually going on as we were talking MMA. So we were generally talking about what was happening. I don't think either of us really were watching it close enough to get a score on it. That first round, the first time through, Fedor ended up winning the majority decision. That first round, I originally gave it a 10-9 because the first part of the first round, Fedor did have Fabio backed against the cage and was landing, a furious flurry of hooks. But going back and watching that fight again, Maldonado came back and he didn't just win the round. He was beating Fedor's ass. The fight should have been stopped, and I actually think that first round was a 10-8. But Fedor came back and won the second 2 rounds. Everyone was crying robbery and saying, "Oh, the only reason Fedor won is because everyone would have been shot if he lost," and it was was that probably the case? Yeah. Fedor is, I think is like the president of the commission that sanctioned the ref to be in the fight. I mean, it's a funny way it works out, but at the same time, am I that gripey over a guy who loses 2 of 3 rounds in a fight, losing the fight? No. He probably deserved to at least get the draw. His dominance in the first round was way more than anything Fedor could muster up in the second 2. But at the same time, 28-28, and a judge scores it 29-28. I really don't feel that bad if you don't win a majority of the rounds and lose the fight. Did you think it was a robbery? And I mean, really, the big story after this is everyone was clamoring to see Fedor in the UFC. After getting his ass handed to him by Fabio Maldonado, a guy the UFC just cut. I don't know if I would want to see Fedor come and, fight a top UFC heavyweight who's going to absolutely maul him and embarrass him. I just really, even though Fedor won, it was not a good night for him at all.
No, certainly not. And I know there was some speculation by a lot of different parties if Fedor was underestimating Fabio Maldonado, and certainly could have been the case. Would have been an explanation. I mean, Fedor definitely came out storming out the gates. He was swinging hard and fast and not connecting a ton, but he had Maldonado in a defensive shell pretty early there. And then Maldonado, I mean, he's a solid boxer, and he's fought the UFC level competition, which Fedor has not. Maldonado has been in there on the biggest stage, and granted, Fedor has been in there on some huge stages. A lot of the Strikeforce stuff. I mean, when he was in Strikeforce, those were big events. Those were very highly rated. So certainly, it's not that Fedor's not used to the spotlight, and not that we would equate a fight pass card for Eurasia Fight Nights to be the spotlight. At least not here in the U.S. Who knows how the Asian and Russian and European broadcasts went out for that particular event. But, Maldonado, he'd been there on the biggest stage against some very tough competition. So he was not there to fold. And if he was, nobody told him that, or they did not pay him enough to fold quickly enough. But yeah, he hurt Fedor pretty bad in that first round. Fedor was stumbling and bumbling, just trying to hold on for dear life. How he was able to, I don't know. And that was definitely a tough round to score because he was very badly hurt. That fight was very close to being stopped. The only issue with that was, did Fedor mount enough offense to warrant or to call it a 10-9? He certainly did at the beginning of the round, although he did spend a lot of that round in recovery mode. Although I did have Fedor taking rounds 2 and 3. So really, for me, I thought that fight was either a draw or a 29-28 for Fedor. Again, I wouldn't have been too upset at a draw. I don't think that would have been the biggest tragedy that's ever happened. But yeah, certainly did not expect Fedor to get caught slipping like that. He nearly paid a big price for that and almost took the L. But yeah, just barely managed to survive that one. The decision, yeah, I have not got to watch that fight again since we were watching it live. Maybe I need to go back and watch it just a little bit closer. But yeah, again, I thought either a draw or a Fedor win would be acceptable outcomes for how that fight played out.
Yeah, we had the Fedor fight, which I guess that was Friday afternoon. UFC Ottawa. I think that was all for recapping the past weekend's fights. So let's get to the news, which isn't playing. Just a few fights that were announced. Nothing major. Hungyu Lim taking on Sultan Alayev. That'll be at UFC 202. The McGregor-Diaz rematch card in Vegas, August 20th. I know our boy, the Eagle, Westland Eagle AH, is pumped up for his boy Ace Hungyu Lim to win, taking on a guy in Sultan Alayev or Alive, I'm not sure. Aliev.
Aliev?
Aliev. Yeah. Aliev is my best guess, and it looks like they're looking to give Hungyu Lim a win here. The guy does train out of Jackson's, which if there's one thing I don't want my opponent to be doing, it's training out of Jackson's. Because usually people training out of Jackson's, A, are fully prepared, B, are sparring and practicing with the best in the world, and C, are being sent in there with a game plan personalized from Yoda himself, Greg Jackson. Alayev lost in Bellator to Doug Marshall before going over to Portugal and Russia, getting 4 fights against unknown bums, all KO and TKO finishes. Had his UFC debut over a year ago, January 2015, where he lost to Kenny Robertson via KO in the first round. So his last 2 fights in major promotions with Bellator and in the UFC have not gone that well. And Lim, I mean, I think Lim, especially with his size, he's 6'3" compared to Alayev, who is I believe 5'11". They listed his weight in centimeters, or his height in centimeters, of course. But Lim, he has lost 2 of his last 3, but they are 2 absolute killers, and Neil Magny and Tarek Saffiedine. The Magny fight, I think he just punched himself out. It looked like he was going to win that fight. He was really testing Magny, who's, a top 10 welterweight, before getting finished in the second round. Which actually was his most recent fight. He, like his opponent, has not fought in a year, so it'll be good to see both of these guys in the cage. Do you have any thoughts on Ace versus Alayev?
I think you broke that one down pretty thoroughly there. I mean, old Ace definitely seemed like another solid prospect from South Korea there. Does seem like a bit of a layup for him to get back on the winning track. But as you mentioned, hey, if you're training out of Jackson's, I mean, they got the game plan and they got the coaching. So certainly doing something right there definitely gives them a fighting chance just having Jackson in his corner for Alayev.
Hey, speaking of South Korean fighters, I'm actually looking now. I know Korean Zombie, Chan Sung Jung, he had to do a mandatory of 2 years military service. A few countries make their men do mandatory work. South Korea, Israel, I think. But I heard that he lost to Aldo, which was his last fight like 3 years ago. Then he went into the military. I think it's over. Does he have an opponent yet? Is he sort of training to get back in shape?
I could have sworn I had heard that. He's eligible to return here. I want to say October.
Yeah, Bloody Elbow and MMA Fighting both wrote a piece on him in March, saying that. All right, wow. So he's still in the military. They actually have a countdown clock on Bloody Elbow. Good on them. 117 days. So that equates to about 4 months. So it'll be, I guess, October, end of October. And it sounds like he has a UFC return on his mind, maybe even late this year. So man, I would love to see. I was watching a GIF earlier today of Korean Zombie and Dustin Poirier, and Zombie takes a couple stiff hits, comes back, rocks Poirier, rolls him up. I mean, the guy was such a grappler, and was finishing all his fights. He subbed out Garcia with a twister, then knocked out Mark Hominick in 7 seconds, then got a Darce choke on Poirier in the 4th round, and then had a decent fight with Aldo. I think he got injured early on. Man, he's exciting. Do Ho Choi. Does he have an opponent yet? Yeah, he's that's gonna be a fun fight. July 8th, he's fighting Thiago Tavares, who I think Choi beats Tavares. Wouldn't you agree?
Ooh,
that
that's
fight?
That's a tough one, man. Tavares,
That'll be-
I think this is going to be his third fight at 145.
That'll be on the Friday night card. I guess the second card of 3 that they do in Vegas. The first card being Alvarez dos Anjos, second one being Gadelli and Jacek, and the third one obviously being that blockbuster UFC 200 card. So Do Ho Choi's fighting on the Friday card. Dude, I think he starches Thiago. I mean, Thiago Tavares is a decent fighter, but I mean, you look at the losses. Brian Ortega, I can't really blame him for a loss against Habib, losing to Shane Roller. Man, he's been in the UFC a long time. Losses to Tyson Griffin, Matt Wyman, Kurt Pellegrino. When's the last time you heard those names?
Oh man, been a long time, especially old Kurt Pellegrino in the winning context.
Yeah. All 3 of those fights losses, but all fights of the night. So Tavares now is 31. Wow, it's funny he fought all the way back at UFC 76, almost a decade ago, at I guess age 21, 22. And now you've got a young 25-year-old Superboy, Do Ho Choi, looking to do work. And yeah, I have Choi winning that fight. Random tangent. Let's get back on track. Another fight that was made for August 27th in Vancouver. That's actually my stepdad's birthday. Shout out to him. Shout out to my mom again. Happy birthday, Mims. Even though I doubt she listens to MMA podcasts. If she were to, happy birthday. Paige Van Zandt against Beck Rawlings. This is sort of interesting. I don't know if I see either woman holding a belt anytime soon. Both of them have sort of shown pretty big holes in their game. I'm going with 12 gauge here. I think Rawlings could win the fight, but Paige, I mean, there is the chance too that all of this, Dancing with the Stars and fame stuff, maybe MMA hasn't been a priority where it has been for Beck Rawlings, but I'll go ahead and pick Paige to win the fight in Vancouver. Who you got?
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup. Beck Rawlings, as you mentioned, I want to say she's got the momentum on her side, whereas Paige Van Zandt has not fought since being pretty thoroughly stomped out by Thug Rose.
Beck 1-2, or sorry, 2-1 in the UFC, losing at that tough finale, but since beating Lisa Ellis via sub, Sohee Ham just a few months ago via unanimous decision, while Paige Van Zandt obviously coming off that beatdown loss to Rose Namajunas and a runner-up finish on Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, so like you said, she may not have been fully into MMA. I mean, obviously, she's been doing the Dancing with the Stars thing. Who knows how much rolling she's been doing or any kind of training. Granted, she's got time to get ready for this fight. But with Rawlings having the momentum on her side, Paige being out for a little bit, Paige still being very young, very green for the sport, I could see this one going either way. Man, I may have to go. Oh, man, my head is telling me that Paige is the smart money, but for some reason my heart is saying to go with Rawlings here. So, you know what? I'll take Rawlings tentatively here.
But your body's telling you Beck. Pat taking Beck Rawlings here. I'll go with 12 gauge. Last one, CM Punk, Mickey Gall. We knew this fight was going to happen, just didn't know when. And it's looking like we finally have a announcement. It'll be UFC 203, Cleveland, Ohio, September 10th. Any thoughts? I mean, we'll break it down when it gets closer. I think the longer, it's been 18 months since he made the announcement that he was going to be fighting in the UFC, which, if anything, is a good thing. I mean, I'm glad he's taking it seriously. And look, everyone who rags on him for being, oh, he thinks he can just dive in. The guy has spent the last 18 months training for this, and before that he's had years of jiu-jitsu, and before that he's had decades of being a professional athlete. I mean, I sort of hate the fact that CM Punk's move to the UFC has been so lauded and so poked fun at, because CM Punk is a serious athlete. Yeah, he might not look roided out, juiced out like a lot of his WWE brethren, but let's not kid ourselves. CM Punk, professional athlete his whole life, like I said, spent a considerable amount of time doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before deciding to join the UFC, and to question the UFC's motives about signing CM Punk and bringing him into the company are just straight foolish. I mean, what is the purpose of a business? To make money. What is bringing CM Punk into this business going to do? Make money. Period. That's all you need to know. I mean, the UFC's motives are to bank off of this and to, I don't know. CM Punk, yes, we've heard reports that he's not, doing as well as a lot of people hoped in the gym. When it's all over, I applaud him for trying and going out, and it's probably the most terrifying thing you can do as a person, to walk out in front of millions of people in your underwear and fight another dude in his underwear in the cage and risk getting knocked the fuck out in front of everybody, including your loved ones, your friends, your family. Dude has balls, and I hope that once everything is over with, we give CM Punk a little bit of respect. Do I think that will happen? No. People are just gonna fucking, laugh and say, "Oh, we all said he was gonna suck, and he sucks. Go back to wrestling, you suck." And that's what the typical Cheeto fingered basement MMA fan would say, but not you. Damn it! You're listening to the MMA podcast. You are educated. You're well read. Like myself and like P Money and like other former hosts of the show, Ramses at the Aunt Jimmy Show, Chris at C. Lowenstein, Ross Finkelstein, E before the L. Shoot, even our old pal Davey Boy. We're gentlemen and scholars, and we don't bring ourselves down to that level. That being said, CM Punk's gonna get super fucked up. He's gonna lose easy to Mickey Gall, and I hope after he gets knocked out, he doesn't fight in the UFC again. But props to him for trying.
That was a great build up for that, Jake. Man, you really sold me. I can't ridicule CM Punk anymore. I mean, honestly, I'm not familiar with him. I did not watch wrestling. Man,
I'm in the same exact boat. Yeah,
I never saw him as a wrestler. From 18 to 30, I did not watch wrestling at all. Just got back into wrestling like late 2015. I'll watch it. It's some good comedy, some good entertainment. But for me, as a mixed martial arts fan, not familiar with CM Punk, I certainly thought that this was just a cash grab, a publicity stunt, something on the level of Kimbo versus Dada, really. Rest in peace, Kimbo. Goddamn. Shit. And you know what? And that's kind of one of the only reasons I'm opposed to this fight, and just to CM Punk being in. I mean, it's good that he's fighting someone who's only 2-0 in mixed martial arts. But this is one of those where, yeah, he's allegedly got some training and got some background in different martial arts, but he does not have the mixed martial arts pedigree. You can be in good physical shape, and still not be a good mixed martial artist. And certainly, I don't think anybody's doubting that CM Punk is a great athlete and in great shape. But just because you're in great shape doesn't mean you're great at fighting. And really, I mean, who hasn't taken some karate or taekwondo class? Nowadays, jiu-jitsu is going to be like a new karate or taekwondo, where half the kids you go to school with are going to be rolling in some jiu-jitsu class. That doesn't mean you're qualified to be a fighter or should be fighting. So I'm interested. I'm very interested to see. I mean, we've got an official date now. CM Punk is coming off of his surgeries. Um, I really don't have a dog in this fight. If he wins, good for him. I mean, unless he looks like the dopest dude at 170 pounds, I don't know how he gets another fight.
Dude, I'll be super stoked if he wins. In fact, I'll probably be one of the few people rooting for him. Just I'm not expecting much, and the two things making me think that, not his work ethic at all. We're working his balls off, but everything I've heard about his training has been bad. Everything I've heard about him sparring and competing in the gym, and dude, maybe that's like them trying to throw a red herring and make people think he sucks when he's really doing good. That would be awesome. But everything I've heard about his training has been bad. And I'm just talking about the public stories. I've never asked anyone in that gym on the side, oh, how's CM Punk doing? You know, I'm just going by stuff that's been published, and everything I've read has not been good. And Mickey Gall looks like an absolute killer. Knocked out that dude on that Dana White reality show, then knocked out Michael Jackson. I think Gall could have a career. I mean, he's young, he's athletic, he's got pinpoint accuracy. They're not giving CM Punk an easy fight. You know, we all thought that CM Punk and probably Brock Lesnar were gonna get gimme fights to get a win and sort of legitimize them, make more money. CM Punk's not getting an easy fight. Brock Lesnar's not getting an easy fight. And I guess good for the UFC for giving him challenges.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to commend them in that. I mean, in Brock Lesnar's first run, I mean, I'll tell you what, he was 1-0 coming to the UFC. He did not get the CM Punk treatment. CM Punk's fighting a guy who himself, well, he has one UFC fight to his name, but that was against a journalist, for Christ's sake. That was against a guy that was on Media Row after their own fight. I don't want to say it hardly counts, but it hardly counts, really. Brock Lesnar, in his second mixed martial arts fight and his UFC debut, took on Frank Mir, the former UFC heavyweight champion. I mean, we all know Brock Lesnar's story, but anyways, coming back for his second stint in the UFC, even though it may just be a one-off fight, again, no easy layup here. He is not getting a lower-ranked UFC heavyweight. He's getting Mark fucking Hunt, the Super Samoan, representing Oceania. And I mean, you really have to commend the UFC. I think CM Punk, I mean, certainly Mickey Gall is not on that level. I mean, he's not as big a test as, Brock Lesnar is getting or has gotten in his UFC career. But again, hey, Mickey Gall, he is 2-0 compared to CM Punk's 0-0. He does have a fight in the UFC compared to where CM Punk once stood in the cage in the UFC. So he does have those advantages. It's not going to be an easy one for CM Punk, especially in his debut with all those eyes on him. So yeah, I think you're right there. You definitely have to commend the UFC for signing the WWE boys up with some stiff challenges.
And Pat, may I just commend you on being the first person I know to use the term Oceania in conversation, which you used very accurately. You know, you can't just call Mark Hunt an an Australian when he's not from Australia. He's from New Zealand, and the term Oceania very correctly identifies the continent of Australia and proximate islands, including Polynesia, Micronesia, New Zealand, and mainland New Guinea. So, Pat, thank you very much for using the correct geography terms here on the MMA podcast. Like I said, a very educational, and this is the Wall Street Journal of MMA podcasts, which I hope does not mean we're boring as hell. We boring as hell.
No, that means we're official and well-read, as he pointed out.
Official review. What else is going on? UFC is about to get sold for $4 billion, or somewhere
Allegedly.
Allegedly somewhere between 4.2 and 4.5 billion. And not much, I guess, has changed since last week when we briefly talked about it. And actually, I think we talked about this specific thing. So we'll briskly move on. Just like I said, keep your eyes on it. An official announcement likely not going to come until UFC 200. So not for a couple weeks. And we can wait. Instead of speculating and wildly guessing, you know, is Dana going to stay? Is Dana going to go? What's better for the sport? I mean, I think Dana staying is as much as you might think I'm an anti-Dana guy. I think Dana staying might be best for the UFC. And yeah, he'll probably get rich as hell on the sale as well. Yeah, we'll see what gets hashed out there, and once it's all made specific, then we'll discuss it. Another topic we've talked about before, GSP coming back. He went on the MMA Hour and apparently said he is ready to for back, as Anderson Silva once said. So that's awesome. I'm looking forward. It'll be weird to see GSP in a UFC fight kit, just like it'll be weird to see Brock. Did you hear Brock is actually going to walk out in a Canada fight kit?
I did not hear that. That's interesting.
I don't know. I don't know if it's, you know, a middle finger to the U.S. or what, but Brock lives in, like, the middle of nowhere on some farm in Saskatchewan. So he technically lives in Canada and is a resident of Canada. Whether he's a citizen, I'm not sure. But he lives in Canada and I guess likes it so much that his fight kit is actually a Canadian fight kit. Speaking of GSP, but yeah, two things I wanted to bring up on GSP. First thing, I guess the one opponent that's been floated around as far as him coming back, an opponent we haven't heard about before, Michael Bisping. Do you give GSP a shot, a crack at the middleweight title? Do you let him leapfrog Jacare, yet another guy to pass Jacare? I really want to see Jacare get it, but I don't know. GSP Bisping would be fun. I feel like if you're gonna plug in a random wild card like GSP, you make it Hendo. But man, if GSP says he'll come back and he really, really, really wants that Bisping fight for the middleweight title, do you give it to him?
Oh, hell no.
Oh, hell no.
Oh, hell no. Why would you give GSP a shot at the middleweight title? I don't ever recall him.
Like 3 years, boy.
You haven't fought in forever, son. Plus, you ain't no middleweight. You were a 170-pounder. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of talk when the super fight talk was going around about him going up to 185 and maybe meeting Henderson Silva or something like that, but GSP is a completely unproven commodity at the 185-pound division. We don't know how he can hang against these bigger guys. And I mean, GSP did not look like the GSP of old in his last few fights. I mean, even if, not even counting the Johnny Hendricks fight, which pretty much everybody in the world unanimously thought GSP lost, except for, two of the three judges sitting ringside. Or no, actually, I want to say that was a unanimous job. Anyways, pretty much everybody else thought GSP lost. Not to mention, you look at his fight versus Nick Diaz. Look at his fight versus Carlos Condit, where Condit almost finished him with the head kick. He has just not been putting on the same GSP quality performances lately. To let him come back, go up a weight class. I mean, I guess it's not unprecedented, the Conor McGregor treatment or what have you. You bump up a weight class, you immediately get a title shot. I guess if they did it for McGregor, even though he had a great string of momentum on his side and was somewhat conceivable as being a decent idea, I just don't know where letting him come in and fight immediately for the middleweight belt makes sense. If you wanted to let him go in there, have a scrap for the welterweight belt, I mean, that at least makes a little more sense because he vacated the belt. He never lost it, even though he should have lost that belt and retired on a loss. Just my opinion, but that's how I saw that one going down. So I would much rather, if you're going to insert GSP into an immediate title shot, let's not leapfrog Jacare anymore. For the love of God, let that man get his title shot at least before 2020 or before the man fucking dies. Jesus Christ. I mean, I know he's not that old, but come on. He's been sitting.
At this pace, he's not going to get a title shot till fucking the year 3000.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So I'd much rather see Jacare get in there at middleweight. You want to give GSP an immediate shot. Throw him in there against the winner of Robbie Lawler versus Tyron Woodley.
No love for Wonder Boy?
Well, I mean, Wonder Boy, I'm just saying, I would much rather see Wonder Boy get leapfrogged as opposed to Jacare. Wonder Boy, although he's certainly more deserving at this point than GSP. He's more deserving than GSP, 100%. But Jacare been leapfrogged for years now. Yeah, Wonder Boy, let him take an extra fight. For GSP, let him take one more. I mean, really though, I don't know who it would be against. Just something to keep him fresh, a little tune-up, I suppose. Maybe take whoever's number 3 or whatever the case may be. But yeah, would definitely rather see GSP for the 170 belt than 185.
Moving right along, or actually, I wanted to ask you one quick question on GSP. Is he the GOAT right now? If we are rating right now, greatest of all time, is he the GOAT?
Oh my goodness, that is such an insanely hard question, and I've really been back and forth on that. I don't know that he is, and I'm really conflicted by that because he does have what I referred. He does have one of the greatest records in the sense that he does have 2 losses on his record, but both of those losses, he lost the first matchup, came back, won the second one in pretty emphatic, and in the case of Matt Hughes, he avenged that loss twice and very emphatically both times. So his record is one of a standard of excellence that I look for and use to define the GOAT. Dominic Cruz has a record that reflects that. He has a single loss on his record, his loss to Uriah Faber, since beat Uriah Faber twice. So the only losses he's had, he is avenged. If you're not undefeated, I at least look for that in your record. My goodness, I just don't know. I think John Jones could very well have a solid claim to that number 1 pound for pound, at least more so than GSP, just because. Oh my God, I don't know.
Honestly, I think if Jones beats DC in a couple weeks, he moves past GSP as number 1. I have GSP as 1 right now. Silva, a close third. I mean, he put up those wild numbers. And Mighty Mouse, a 4th that's continuing to move up. I think I have Fedor at the 5 spot maybe. Mighty Mouse with what he's done. I have him above Faber, and I have him looking to get up past Anderson and looking to be in the top 3 with Jones, GSP. I don't count the Hamill loss against Jones at all. GSP avenged his losses. Both GSP and Jones have had just a murderer's row of opponents. And when it's all said and done, though, I think it'll probably be John Jones. Just as much as it sucks that it takes away from Mighty Mouse, the reason I don't think Mighty Mouse will ever pass GSP or Jones is because in cleaning out his division, he just didn't fight the names that GSP and Jones fought. But moving on, trying to wrap this show up in the next little while. Keep it nice and brief. Really quick, before we do a quick Bellator 157 Dynamite 2 prelim, any thoughts on Will Brooks coming to the UFC? I mean, this dude is a fucking killer. Brooks versus Cerrone, that would be a fun fight. Let me pull back up those UFC lightweight rankings. I mean, I think Brooks is going to make waves and eventually fight for a UFC title.
Yeah, I can certainly see it happening. Brooks is definitely one of the best 155-pounders, aside from maybe Michael Chandler, that isn't in the UFC. And I know a lot of us hardcore MMA fans have really been looking for Will Brooks to come over for some time. He's definitely a highly touted prospect, and with good cause. I mean, he's got solid all-around fundamentals. I think he could definitely make an impact right away coming over the UFC. I mean, the 155-pound division is super deep, as we all know. It's been one of the deepest for years and years. But I would not doubt Will Brooks could easily come in, make a quick impact, and see himself into the top 10, top 5, maybe even title contention in short order for sure.
Yeah, maybe a Dustin Poirier, however you say his name.
Ooh.
He's been looking excellent. That would be a fun fight. All right, let's get to Bellator 157 before we close this out. The prelims are all trash. What else?
Shocker.
Yeah, shocker. This will be tomorrow night, actually, Friday night on Spike. Matt Mitrione making his Bellator debut against Carl Ciumanutafa. So good luck to the meathead, I guess. Michael Chandler, minus 260 against Patricky Fieri. And this is the second Dynamite card they're doing. We're seeing Quentin Jackson versus Satoshi Ishii. Who you got in those fights? And then we'll close it out.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm pretty excited actually for the Dynamite format. I thought that was pretty neat the way they did it. I was skeptical at first, like I think a lot of us were, but no, I liked it. It had a lot of the fanfare and I don't want to say sensationalism, but just a lot of the production value. Very Japanese. Reminded me of a New Year's Eve Japan Dynamite card. So I definitely like the feel. I like the presentation. And it's got a kind of New Year's Eve Japan squash match setup, it seems like. I mean, I don't know. I'm only ever familiar with Ishii. I think the only times I've seen him fight is like getting beat by Fedor. I can only think that Quentin Jackson is going to handle Ishii in short order. I mean, Ishii is, I want to say, an Olympic gold medalist in judo. So he definitely has some solid skills there. Who knows? May put a little hip toss on Rampage, but Rampage, he's seen it all. He's been in there for a long time. I have to go with him in the headliner. Speaking of Michael Chandler, him and Patricky Fieri, I always root with the Pitbull brothers just because I am Patrick.
they're Patricky and Patricio. So it's like they're like my Brazilian brothers, or at least cousins. We're tight. We've been tight. I'm always going to root for my boy Patricky. He's got a super tough matchup in Chandler. We all know what Chandler can do. He's also, like Will Brooks, as we mentioned, one of the best at 155 that's not in the UFC. I'm rooting for my boy Patricky, but damn, he's got a tough one there. That'll be a solid scrap. And solid scrap, speaking of, Matt Mitrione, Meathead, one of my favorite The Ultimate Fighter Season 10 contestants. Although I didn't really like him so much on the show, more so for his body of work inside the octagon after the show. Making his Bellator debut. Yeah, I have no clue who Carl Sumanatafa is, but I know that Mitrione, in spite of that tragedy of a fight against Travis Brown and how some of that went down, Mitrione has really gotten better over the years, training with the Black Zillions. His striking is really solid for a guy his size. He, at least for me, hey, I'm no Freddie Roach, but I like what I see from Matt Mitrione. He seems to put together some solid technical punching and some really great kicks he's incorporated as well. So, I think Mitrione should get a solid punching bag for his Bellator debut. There should be a nice little trio of fights, I'd say.
And I guess that about does it. We'll put a bow on it. Pat, thank you so much as always. Where do we find you?
Well, Jake, everybody can find your boy at Sweet Pappy Jones on all the social media. If you find a social media account at Sweet Pappy Jones and you wonder if it's me or not, hit me up on the Twitter. I'll let you know if it's official. I've pretty much bogarted all the accounts, so ain't nobody posing as Sweet Pappy out there. That's your boy, legit.
That's your boy, legit Sweet Pappy Jones on the IG, a cigar aficionado, living out in the deserts of South Cali. We thank you once again, and we thank you for listening to the show, giving us all of that positivity, like I said, on the Twitter, giving us the downloads, giving us the subscribes, the thumbs up, the likes, all you do. We love the shit out of you. And next week, I have no idea what's on the docket, but it should be some good shit. I do have some interviews I'm going to try and schedule and record in the coming few weeks. I want to get Ben Askren on the show, talk about the UFC sale, see maybe if new ownership in the UFC means he might be a little bit more leaning towards going over there and doing business with the new UFC brass. That would be fun. Want to get Aljamain Sterling on in July at some point, talk about his loss, talk about what he wants to do, and I'm sure he's still hungry for that bantamweight title, a belt I know he will get one day, because you know what, he's already a two-time The MMA Podcast guest. He knows what greatness tastes like. And enough with me ranting. We'll see you next Wednesday or Thursday. We love the shit out of you. Until next week, we are.
Shout out to Jake. Tune into the MMA Podcast every Tuesday night.
Got the wild style, always been a foul child.
Relax, sucker. I be the coming like Noah.
The MMA Podcast, Jake is the host. And since Ramsey's been in a wheelchair, the Aunt Jimmy Show has been on the road. I wanna say John Jones is a host, so I think that I'll pick up the phone and dial 213-457-3380. We got hot takes on the stove. You get blood on your clothes if you're sitting in the front row. I throw on my gi and then I lace the hoops. I'll have Yao lying down cause he ain't the truth. And if Allen wasn't a cop